Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Construction Business Management. Today we're going to be following up on the areas that we've been talking about with human resource management. This whole course is about starting a business, understanding mission, vision, where we want to take it, the aspect of the financial statements, the balance sheet, change cash flow, the income statement. We've looked at that. We've looked at the various ratios that are used. And lately we've been looking at the human resource plan. And now we've been talking about organizational behavior, trying to set the right culture, how to better engage your employees, how to hire the right employees, how to retain the right employees. All of these aspects come into play. And so today we're going to be looking at further, as I mentioned, the aspect of flow and the motivational engagement theory that was developed by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Probably didn't pronounce it right, but that's the best I can do with that name. But very famous researcher in this area of flow, literally came up with the concept. We're also going to be talking about employee engagement and some little bit of stats from Gallup in this area, and we'll be following up with that in lecture 12 as well. So some of the things that we've been looking at with regards to goals and extrinsic rewards, because right now we're kind of getting into the intrinsic motivational aspect, but we have covered reward systems, extrinsic rewards, a carrot, how much money, a bonus for this. And in the previous lectures, if you haven't seen them, I'll put a list of links below in the description. And you can also go to the business management section on my playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can see all the previous videos in this particular course. So we talked about extrinsic rewards and how that's kind of a short-term, gives you a short-term bump or drive to try to get at it, and most employers do it. But you don't get as much of a bump or as long of a bump as you tend to get with intrinsic drivers. If you put an employee in a project they're really interested in, for example, that's going to go a long way in having them more engaged with the work. It's not the only thing, as you'll see, but it is one of the things that fits in there. And we've also mentioned, the financial crisis of 2008 was pretty much caused by misguided, very myopically oriented goals. And it happens in the construction sector too. If the closing date, as our previous case discussed, is the engagement point, the goal, then you know what? You're probably going to reach it. You know what, though? Other things are going to be problematic. So that's something that we mention here. And Daniel Pink, who's wrote a book called Drive, meaning motivational drive, kind of made that statement there with regards to irrational exuberance. So goals that people set for themselves and that are developed to attaining mastery are usually healthy. That's intrinsic type rewards. Goals imposed by others, sales targets, quarterly returns, can sometimes have dangerous side effects. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes. You've got to carefully think those through. So if you're running your business and you're setting up your business and you're coming up with some rewards and bonus systems, keep that in mind, that you've got to be really careful about how you structure that and set that up. But I did want to bring in, because we did talk about Maslow and we talked about theory X and theory Y, motivational theories, and Vroom's expectancy. I wanted something a little bit more current, and so I brought up flow, which, as I said, has been heavily researched and looked at over the years by Mihaly. And a flow state, everybody's experienced a flow state, and you can identify with it. When you get yourself into a state where the time just goes by and you look at your watch and wow, where did the last 3 or 4 hours go? Well, you were in that flow state. If you were working on something, you were really feeling good about what you were working with. You weren't overly struggling with it, but it was challenging, but not detrimentally or over the stress limit challenging. And that helped you get into that flow state. Well, if you have people involved in things that they enjoy, or is more, it doesn't have to be, don't get me wrong with happiness, it just has to be something that's of interest, right? Then you're much more likely to get a more engaged employee. And if you have more engaged employees, they're more likely to get into flow states more frequently. Not that we're in flow states all the time, but there are sometimes things that as a business owner you can do, or a manager you can do, that can direct people in the areas that puts them into that kind of flow state, or has the opportunity to perhaps put them in that flow state a little bit more frequently. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, so to speak. But you're really involved. To be in that flow state, you're involved in what you're doing. You're in that sort of zone. You really have clarity about what needs to be done. You feel that you've got the capability of doing it. That's because sometimes you get stressed out if it's like you feel like it's impossible to get there. That's not going to be getting you into a flow state. And it's just this sort of sense of serenity and timelessness that goes in. That's intrinsic motivation that produces flow on its own reward. So you kind of have to, Mihaly had this sort of chart that he used, and you can't be that you don't care. And we've talked about that with goal setting as well. If you're in that set of apathy there and you don't care, you're not going to get into a flow state. You're probably going to fall asleep with boredom or that sort of thing. If you're too relaxed too, it's not quite as good. But if you're getting a sense of control or of interest, arousal about what it is you're going to do, you're now focusing, you're closing in, you're zoning in on that flow state. But if you're stressed out, worry, anxiety, that's not going to get you there. So these are the sort of areas that you want to do. Now you can start thinking about these too. As a manager, it's not too hard to put somebody into this or into this if you're not careful too. Sometimes, everybody needs a little bit of a push on things, but if there's this Dodson curve, and if there's this optimal stress level, like if you have no stress or no concern about things, then you kind of maybe fall into this apathy, boredom area, right? But if you have too much stress, you fall into this area. So it's trying to get you over onto the positive side of the chart here, which is going to make you much more productive, much more efficient in what you're doing. Some of you, think of some managers maybe you've had where they've kind of stressed you out and you didn't really enjoy the process. You might have gotten some things done, but not in a good way. And at the end of the day, was it worth it? There's different viewpoints on that. But if you're looking as an employer, am I going to retain employees? Am I going to do better over the long run with these employees? Then that's really getting what this is doing. There's an excellent book I just read that's on this topic too. It's called Effortless. And what this is doing, it's kind of putting you into that zone of, can I make this less effort? Like, can I make this that it's not drudgery, that I don't enjoy it? Can I reframe this that it is more enjoyable, more engaging? And as an employer or a manager, if you can keep people away from getting into this and more into this side, it's going to have a positive impact on productivity. It's not something that you are going to be in here that you pointed out, but you kind of have that underlying with some of the other things that we've been talking about in the course that can help to improve a person's flow. And if you put into practice what we've been discussing over the last couple of lectures, and including what this is, it's definitely going to make or create a culture that has a more positive framework to it. There's negative cultures, there's kind of apathetic cultures, there's adversarial cultures, and there's positive, proactive, collaborative cultures. And you definitely in construction want a positive, proactive, collaborative kind of culture, because you're going to run into problems in that. You're going to need to get that kind of cooperation and engagement to be actually really successful in this industry. And that can be very, very helpful for you as a small business owner, getting that kind of culture going. So before you fly off the handle and you stress somebody out, you got to start thinking about what's the most effective way to manage my employees here. And that will help you put it from that perspective. And if you put yourself in the employee's shoes and you look at it from that, or you remember your past when you were an employee, that can be very, very helpful for you too. So it's a tool that can be used in that way to help you not burn out your employees and to retain them more over the longer term. Very, very positive aspect. That's why organizational behavior plays such an important role. We really do need our knowledge workers. And in construction, it's not only working with the hands, you've got to have that knowledge base really working collaboratively for you. And that's the best way to engage them, right? So you can think about this. If you were an employee, what would motivate you to work for a company long term as a career? What are those things? Is it opportunities for advancement? Is it challenging jobs and projects that give me some autonomy and ownership over them without the micromanagement aspect? And if I've been trained properly, does it offer that aspect of training like we've discussed before? And does that give me the opportunity to really get into that flow state and be able to accomplish more? That's probably going to be somebody that's going to want to stay long term. And those are some of the things, the way an employer needs to look at it, to what are the things I can do to maximize those efforts. Consider personal reasons, monetary reasons, how the individual may be performing. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we talked about last time on that aspect, because you do have to be past a certain stage. And what's the biggest consideration for you personally? And understanding that everybody's an individual, and some are more extrinsically motivated, some aren't. And generally, there's a good sweet spot in there with the two of them. I put this part here with employee engagement. There's been a lot of research done, particularly by Gallup, over the last few decades. That Gallup survey, it's from their book Strength Finder. It's been #1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list for eons. So one of the stats, and again, it depends where you read the stat from which year, because they're always conducting these surveys. So you might look it up. I've seen it as low as 15, but 30% of employees are engaged in their work. Really, I think it was United States, but we'll say North America to include Canada. I don't think it differentiates that much. So 30% of employees are engaged in their work in North America. It is actually lower. I think it's more towards the 15 to 18% globally. So you get a sense of the spread there. If your manager is primarily, so these 3 points, if your manager primarily ignores you, so really I think I could have phrased that better, but let's just say if your manager primarily ignores you, right, the chances of you being actively disengaged are 40%. So if you've got employees and you kind of, they're just doing their thing, whatever, and you're not really paying attention to them, they're much more likely to be disengaged, right? So actively disengaged. That's different than engaged. We're not talking about just not engaged, actively disengaged. That means they're looking for a job somewhere else. They don't care about this job. They're doing time. You do not want employees that are doing time. This is not a prison, right? So believe it or not, that's higher, 40%. I was surprised with this the first time I read this as well. 40% actively disengaged if your boss ignores you. It's only 22% actively disengaged, right, if your boss focuses on your weaknesses. So that means if you got kind of a miserable boss and they kind of just, every time you do something wrong, they're telling you, but they're not telling you what you do right, right? So that's going to get you 22% disengagement. Actually less than being ignored, but still very high number. That's a high number to have actively disengaged employees. Not just disengaged, actively. They're looking for another job. They don't care about this job. 1% are actively disengaged if you focus on their strength. Well, you're always going to have somebody that's not going to be engaged, right? But that's going to be actively disengaged, only 1%. So that's a huge number. That's a huge number. So you definitely want to focus on people's strengths. Doesn't mean that you don't tell them what they're not doing right, but you figure out a way, and that's easier said than done. You figure out a way to actively engage them. If somebody has been delivering projects late, maybe some aspect of a project, some task that they're supposed to do, if you, as their boss, you sit down with them and you try to help them and engage with them on how to improve in this area. In other words, you help them to develop the tools, the techniques, the habits, the routines, the rituals, the systems. We've talked about all these things earlier in the course to be better at what they do. And you do it in such a way that they feel that you're trying to help them. Then really what you're trying to do is build some strengths for them. That's different than really sort of hammering them about their weaknesses. And if they truly believe that you have their best interests in heart, right, then you won them over. And they are not going to be actively engaged. They are going to become more engaged. And you're going to be getting higher numbers of this, right? So maybe, you know, the average company in North America, 30% of employees are engaged. Well, can you imagine what a difference that would make if instead of you had 30% of the employees, you had 50% that were actively engaged, and you had 49% that were somewhat engaged, and you only ended up with 1% that were actively disengaged. That would be amazing competitive advantage for your business. If you want to get down to it, it's people that are going to make your business successful. It's very important. We spend a lot of time on financial statements. We spend a lot of time on the different ratios. We spend a lot of time on marketing and trying to attract clients. This is important as well, very important as well. So employee engagement will make a big difference for you in that way. So I want you to really take that to heart and think about that. And that's kind of why we spent the last 1.5 sort of lectures or videos on this particular topic of organizational behavior, because it's very important for businesses, and most regular business courses forget about this. I did not want to forget about this in this course because it's very important. There's a few things, again, I would encourage you, because I still have only touched on this. You know, I've spent years on this topic. I do a lot at University of Toronto on this topic in their HR management course for in their Masters of Engineering. But I would say if you would, you know, follow up a little bit, especially if you plan on managing people and starting your own business. Starting up, take a few look. There's a lot of decent videos on YouTube. You can do a search on YouTube on Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book called Grit. Very good on that topic of resilience and what are some of the traits. Again, it's just one quality, but it gives you a perspective. Fairly current book within the last 6 or 7 years. Happiness is a competitive advantage, a different viewpoint on things. So you could take a good look at that. Flow, you can see Mihaly himself. A little bit of a strong accent, but really good video on that. And The Puzzle of Motivation by Daniel Pink. I said he wrote a book called, I think I got it up there on the, there it is. Basically, the book on Drive by Daniel Pink, but he's got a pretty good YouTube video that kind of explains some of the aspects of motivation and extrinsic rewards versus intrinsic rewards. So you get a good sense of what we were trying to do. He's got a few little fun examples that he does in that YouTube video. So hopefully that's given you a good idea on engagement and motivation. Coming up in the future lectures here, we're going to be looking at leadership. We're going to be looking at regulatory requirements, to give you just a heads up of some of the things you need to consider from a regulatory perspective when you start up your business. And then we're going to be wrapping things up with a review. So I think we have 3 or 4 short videos left, 3 videos after this one, I believe. And that'll close off this particular course. So I'm Tom Stevenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.